As we continue on in the book of Matthew, we come to a passage that certainly speaks to honoring mothers. You might say providentially. I would say really the key of the passage is elsewhere, though. In some sense, it speaks to being a minimalist, cutting things out of your life that really have no actual value so that you can see what matters most. Some of you are probably good at being minimalist. I'm kind of on the fence. Our family, there's times when it feels good to maybe get something out of the house, give it away, be a minimalist. But then if I'm really honest, we're probably kind of bad at it. I've been to people's houses who value being minimalist, and they'll have like 8 glasses. In the whole house, you got 8 glasses. I'm thinking, what if you have 9 people over? Because, for us, we've kept every souvenir cup for 15 years straight. Right? We're going to go back to that place at the beach and restock their entire deal. So being minimalist hasn't been real helpful. At the same time, there are occasions in which we see that it could be helpful. Maybe there are things in your life that you have a whole lot of that kind of are a distraction. You get away this summer on vacation. While you're on vacation, you get really bad cell signal. So for a week, you're going to go without. You do start to have withdrawals, so you get to the restaurant, and it looks like you hate each other because you're trying to just check everything on your phone. But it's because otherwise you haven't been able to look at it, and you really have been fully disconnected from your phone for several days. On those occasions, isn't it sweet, though, when you do something you don't usually do? You actually read a book on vacation. You actually sit down and talk with your family. You bust out an old board game. And for just a moment, this reprieve, you've gotten that out of your life for just a second, and you think, man, we were probably missing some things that really mattered. Maybe it's even the quiet of not being able to distract yourself with social media and thinking through what really matters. Jesus is actually prescribing that kind of minimalist mindset in this passage. He's saying you've caught up with all these things that you think matter, and you're trying to please all these different people, and he says you're missing what is most significant. So he leads his followers to cut those things out of their lives so they can zero in on what really matters. You might say, what's really at the heart of things. He goes so far to say that they're actually so distracted they've blinded themselves. So how do we get to what really matters in a spiritual sense? Jesus is going to walk us through using really kind of a peculiar instance about washing of hands and how you should honor your mother and your father to make his point. So here's the danger of this passage. The first thing we have to do is this connects in a way that I think is overwhelming and we don't see it. So we got to kind of quickly come to connect their issue with our issues. Once we've done that, then we can see how to minimize influences, or how Jesus led his followers to, in order to ultimately look inside. So points this morning: connect the issue, minimize the influence, look to the inside. All right, connect the concern. Let me give you just the briefest overview of what's going on. It might not be readily evident to you. If you've been following with us in the book of Matthew, you'll recall that Jesus, just in the prior chapter, got through feeding 5,000 men plus their families miraculously with a handful of pieces of bread, 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he's able to feed thousands of people. Well, we know from John 6 that word gets out. Jesus did this miracle. Now, follow the flow of it. Jesus does the miracle, feeds thousands of people, sends his disciples off in a boat. He goes up on a mountain to pray, but then he walks on the water to the boat. So the people that got fed have no idea where Jesus is. I would dare say they didn't expect him to scamper across the waves. So they think he's still up on the mountain. They wake up the next morning, they're looking for Jesus. He did that bread miracle. They can't find him. John says that they travel all around the lake until they find Jesus. This mass of people is determined to hunt him down. So fame spreads from that miracle of feeding thousands of people. In a day and age where we just shoot over to the grocery store and we say things like, I would hate to see my child go to bed hungry, we can't comprehend the feeding thousands of people. They thought going to bed hungry is what you call the off season. It was just part of life. So when you have somebody who can miraculously feed all of us, that's worth tracking down. So word spreads like wildfire because this man is doing miracles on the scale. It's unfathomable. Word spreads all the way south to Jerusalem. Well, this is a threat to the religious community. Now everybody, mobs of people surrounding a lake to get to Jesus. They said, we need to send some official delegates up there. So that's where we pick up chapter 15. We see the Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem. This is the official group. The morality police show up. The morality police show up, and you can't say a whole lot about people, a guy who's been feeding people. That's just hard to criticize. So they said, well, we know what your disciples haven't been doing. They haven't been washing their hands when they eat. Gotcha. So for us, again, let's pause for just a second. We hear washing your hands, and we think it's a sanitary issue. And some of you are very conscious about germs. You're actually glad that the germ police showed up. You think, amen, finally somebody calling people out for not washing their hands. So it's a little different in this particular instance. What they're doing, and the accusation is, they don't wash their hands. It's a ceremonial washing. So now I'm going to gross out the germ people. What they did is they had a basin, and everybody who's going to eat comes by and dips their hands in the same bowl, not a pool, it's not that big, bowl of water. They dip their hands, shake your hands off, now you're ready to eat. Because the point was to ceremonially demonstrate purity before eating. Here's the thought. It's kind of like cooties. You could have gotten from the marketplace contamination. You touched something that a Gentile touched. You touched something that was in the same area that maybe a pig or another unkosher animal was. So you didn't want to put that in your body. So you would go by, dip your hands in the water, shake them off, now I can go eat. You're probably, to be honest, gaining germs, but that's not the point. So they said, your disciples have not been ceremonially washing. The ceremonial washing is not prescribed in the Old Testament. But Mark, in Mark chapter 7, he says it had gotten out of hand. He says many other traditions that they observe along with washing the hands, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. So everything is going to get dipped. So they believe the problem is your disciples weren't washing everything. All right, so let's pause for just a second. That sounds, if I'm guessing, like an weird ancient custom being upheld by nitpicky people. Does that sound right? You think, yeah, they were kind of nitpicky. They seem to be really about the rules. They had this weird ancient custom that you're supposed to dip everything in water, and we don't do that. We're not nitpicky. Let's move on. So here's where we need to see this. Why I was saying, in all seriousness, earnestness, this passage is immensely relevant, but we've got to see the connection to our day and age. So here is the point. They show up to Jesus and they say, in our society, this is one of the things we do. This is one of our values. To not value what we value in our society is very disrespectful. Let's walk through that again, because it hits hard once we see it. What they're describing is, we have certain values, virtues, things that we hold dear. And if you don't demonstrate that you appreciate those also, it is rude, hurtful, and very disrespectful. So follow me on this. What is something in our society that might get pushed on you that we would otherwise say is unbiblical? I'm going to give you a couple for instances. Brace yourself. When our society says, if you don't ask somebody their pronouns first, that's very disrespectful. It gets pushed. You don't do it at your place of work. HR Pharisees show up. No amen? Okay. Right? They show up and they say, this is what we do. And if you're not willing to engage in it, I think a lot of people here are going to be really offended. So here's our thought, and it was the disciples' thought. Man, it's not wrong to ask somebody their pronouns. It's not wrong to wash your hands. So why not just play along? Yes, we don't believe that. Yes, we think differently. But just play along. It's not going to hurt you just to play along. Do you see that was the disciples' actual thought? Is don't be offensive? Did you catch that? If you go back to the passage. Verse 12. Then the disciples came and said to him, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? When you start saying it's not necessary, do you realize how offensive that is? I don't think it's going to hurt anything, Jesus, if we dip our hands before we eat. We can just play along. Right, so here's where this should get into our minds. What else in society is a rule you're encouraged? You just think, we'll just play along. It's maybe not biblical, but let's just go along with it. So this happens kind of on both sides of the aisle, so to speak. Sometimes it's which pronouns are preferable. Other times it's you should be very Republican if you're going to be Christian. And you think, I'm more independent, but I just kind of play along. I know it really matters a lot to them, so I just play along. I don't want to be offensive. And sometimes you just go along to get along. So here's where Jesus is trying to instruct his followers. He is saying explicitly, he led them not to wash their hands. It was not just they happened to not do it one time. He's leading them not to. Verse 10 and 11. And he called the people to him. He's wanting to instruct them at this point. The whole crowd, disciples included. Hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles a person. To which they respond from within Christian circles, we hear you, but it still seems offensive. Christian circles in our day, very similarly. Andy Stanley is probably one of the most noted leaders in this regard. If he's not on your radar, great. Please do not Google him. All right, but he's one of the most pronounced. His thing he keeps coming back to is, the gospel is offensive enough. Let's not offend people in other areas. So let's tell them the gospel, but then anything else, just play along. Just go along with it. What's it going to hurt? So Jesus is instructing those outside, the Pharisees, the society at large, we're not washing our hands. Those in Christian circles who say, I don't think we should be offensive. This seems rude. He doubles down on it. So why is he pushing in this way? He is telling them that this is not just a simple issue where you can just play along. If you are going along with somebody's ethical principles, there's two things that undergird it that he wants them to minimize. So our second idea is minimize this influence. Here's what he says. Ethical principles outside of Scripture have a self-centered component and a self-righteous component inherently. So you want to minimize that in your life. Hopefully we caught the self-centered component. He references the 10 Commandments. And he says, you should honor your father and mother. Right? He's going back to the Old Testament. He's going to reference the 10 Commandments more fully in verse 19. But he's drawing from that, and he's saying, you shall honor your father and mother. And he says, but you don't honor father and mother. He's pointing out that their whole system is self-centered. You're worried about rules of dipping your hands that make you seem pious, but when it really comes down to following God, you're really just looking out for yourself. See, here's kind of a fascinating thing. Do you see who honor your father and mother is being applied to? Adults with a pretty decent income. Those are the ones who should honor father and mother. Adults with a pretty decent income that have elderly parents that need assistance. Those are the one who honor father and mother. That's kind of interesting. When we apply it to your kids, your 8-year-olds, which is great, they should honor father and mother, and you should teach it, but you should go live it. So he says, you've come up with this whole thing about, well, anything I would have earned is a gift to God. Check out how pious this sounds, how righteous this sounds. What they say is, all my money really is going to go to God. Granted, I have to live off of it. But if I'm going to give it away to anybody, I'm going to give it to God. So I can't be generous to you because one day my money's going to God. So yes, I got to live off of it in the meantime. So really, practically, I suspect for many of them, that really is how it functioned. When they died, their money went to the temple. But it sounded really super spiritual. Man, I don't even give to my parents. That's how much I give to God. Well, Jesus sees right through it. And he says, no, really, you've come up with a system in which you can base your entire self-centered approach to finances on a moral dictate, a doctrine of men. Secondly, he says, inherently it's self-righteous. So if you're not usually around church, please follow me on this one. They've been told, wash your hands. That would be really good. Think how literal that is. If you want to be in good standing with God, go clean yourself up. So if you're not usually in church, please, I need you to hear this point. We seem as a society to have that impression. If I want to be good with God, I need to go clean myself up. That's being self-righteous, earning your own right standing. And somehow that just seems to get into our thinking. You think, before I can sit in these pews, yeah, I came with Mom on Mother's Day, but if I were going to do this regularly, I got to get some stuff straight in my life first. Do you see he's saying that's ridiculous? You're not going to be able to clean yourself up. Then come sit here. As we're going to obviously see, he's saying the heart is the issue. So you can do all the cleaning up you want, but it doesn't get at the real issue. In fact, it distracts you from the real issue. So here's his encouragement to his followers. If things in your life are virtues, we're not washing our hands just for good sanitation. We're washing our hands because that somehow makes me a little better person. Jesus is telling his followers, minimize those. If not, get rid of them altogether. You see that with his followers? They quit washing their hands. Here's his logic for why you should minimize it. He says it blinds you to the truth. And those that are telling you to live that way are just blind guides leading the blind. Where do you land? You're in a deep, dark pit. The blind leading the blind end up in a pit. That sounds like kind of a strong idea, but here's his logic. If you don't realize what's really going on in your life, where the real need is, your heart, you're going to end up in the pit. These things function like a distraction. I feel pretty good. I mean, I dipped my hands before we ate. Maybe you've seen somebody good at distractions. You have. You just didn't know it. About 2 months ago, we had a gentleman preach one Sunday morning. All the elders were away on a conference, had a gentleman preach one Sunday morning, Dr. Andy Lackey. Dr. Lackey came that Sunday, shortly before Easter, and he preached on the resurrection of Lazarus. So if you recall that gentleman, he was bald. Did that help? All right, so distinguishing factor. So Dr. Lackey is really good at one other thing other than preaching and being a pastor. He has a whole second ministry. He is a Christian magician. You didn't even know that existed. Christian magician, magic shows. So we met while we were in seminary. There was one night in particular, we're all sitting around having pizza. So here he says, I do magic. And we all kind of chuckle, like we're thinking Harry Potter. Like, well, do it to me then. And he goes, no, really, it's like card tricks and stuff. And he says, then I use it to give my testimony. Well, we'll do a card trick. So now he has, picture this for just a second, a pizza table in a restaurant. You've got 9 guys going through a doctoral program at seminary, watching you to bust you, to see where you mess up. He has a guy write his name on a card, put it back in the deck, fans the cards out, and he says, okay, pick this card and it will be yours. Well, Dustin picks a card and he goes, I mean, it's not mine, doesn't have the signature. He went, oh, well, here, put that one back. Slides it back. Fans them again. He says, okay, pick this card, it will be yours. Same deal. Picks it and he goes, oh, it doesn't have the signature. At this point, we went from like we're trying to bust you to, oh, bless your heart. I hope we find this card eventually. We're going to be here all night at this rate. He says, you know what the problem is? It's not in here. Flips the deck of cards over. It's nowhere to be found. So now we're all kind of intrigued. He said, it's in Brian's pocket. Brian goes wide-eyed. There is no way. Puts his hand in his pocket, comes out with a signed 2 of diamonds. And we lose our mind. You did it! I mean, we thought there's no way he can fool us. The distraction, you will think by all these little virtues, I must be good. And really, you were so distracted, you're headed straight for absolute failure in the spiritual sense. Jesus says all along, where the real issue wasn't in the deck of cards, it wasn't in the washing of hands, it was in you. It was your heart. He's saying if you don't look within, you will have missed what matters most. Believer, Christian here. When you don't minimize those other kind of virtues and you allow them to play a role in your life, it is so distracting, you will forget what's most significant. And you will give in to self-centeredness and self-righteousness. You actually have to say, all right, I'm going to stop playing along. I know some might take it as rude. I know some might take it as offensive. I'm not going to say anything mocking about them, but as for me, I've got to pull back and I'm not going to play along. For those who do not have a relationship with Christ, there's no amount of following the rules, even the biblical rules, that's going to change you. You can follow all the Bible rules you want. You could be great. You're here today because you honor mom. Without a changed heart, you're just kidding yourself. But the beauty of it is, that's precisely what Jesus offers. He says in Jeremiah, I will take away your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. Same concept in Ezekiel. So he boils it down to a simple idea. Romans 10:9. If you've never trusted Christ, I would encourage you, Google this verse. Romans chapter 10:9. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. No amount of cleaning you up is going to save you from anything. But he's willing to transform you from the inside out. I hope that all these other virtues, all these other ways, giving people the shirt off your back, whatever else, doesn't lull you into the thought that you're somehow a good person in right standing. These people were dipping their hands every time they ate on that very principle. I could do just enough, I'll be a good person. And Jesus says, all that is done is taking your attention away from what matters most. You need a changed heart. Something only God can work in your life. Church family, I hope God will call to your attention spots where you're playing along with some value system that has no basis in Scripture, and you decide, you know what? For me and my family, we're not going to play along any longer. For those who came here today without a relationship with Jesus, you've been distracted by a magician. I hope you see what really matters is within you. Would you please stand as we sing this final song together?